Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something pretty wild. We are demystifying the mystical. We're going to strip away millennia of heavy dogma to reveal a really fascinating shared truth about human consciousness. And to do this, we're drawing entirely from a phenomenal piece of work called The Dusk Analyst, which takes this hard, deeply structural look at exactly what happens when the human vessel stops running. So let's just dive right into what is honestly a massive historical anomaly. One that spans thousands of years and multiple continents. Think about it for a second. How is it that completely independent mystics, separated by vast, uncrossable oceans and totally incompatible cultures, all manage to point to the exact same underlying structure of reality? We are absolutely not talking about vague myths here. We're talking about highly specific, replicated observations of what lies beneath everyday human consciousness. Section 1. A global mystical mystery. We have to begin our investigation with an incredible statistical impossibility that unites humanity's absolute oldest traditions. These completely isolated cultures, with zero shared languages or borders, all flat out refuse to treat the death of the biological body as the end of the line. I mean, the early Buddhists definitely weren't reading their Upanishads. The Aztec priests weren't exactly holding international conferences with Sufi masters, right? Yet they all insisted, independently, that something persists. If they were just making things up around a campfire, you'd expect their inventions to wildly diverge over time. But their accounts don't diverge. Inexplicably, they converge. Specifically, they all converged on this exact 4+1 shape. Across all these different traditions, they saw four distinct fates that we passively fall into, which our source material defines structurally as dissolution, persisting in torment, persisting in peace, and rebirth. But then there's this one rare, fifth fate that is actively chosen and realized while a person is still alive. This incredibly specific level of agreement proves they were observing a shared objective territory rather than just randomly hallucinating.
Section 2. Founders versus the carriers.
Okay, so if they all saw the exact same underlying reality, why on earth do world religions look so incredibly different today? Well, there's a huge disconnect between the original founders of these traditions and the people who carried them forward. The original founders directly perceived a layered, dynamic medium. They saw profound non-separateness. But their followers, the carriers, couldn't directly see that abstract structure. So they did what we humans always do. They translated it. They turned this dynamic medium into literal physical places, like clouds or fiery underworlds, and they turned profound non-separateness into a transactional doctrine all about individual soul survival. Over centuries, these well-intentioned translations completely wrapped the original observations in layers of heavy religious machinery. They effectively turned a layered, dynamic medium into what we can call a divine sentencing arrangement based entirely on behavioral accounting. So, to find the real original phenomenon, we have to unwrap it.
Section 3. The bounded self-illusion.
To get to the truth hidden underneath all that machinery, we have to confront a very, very uncomfortable illusion about who or what we actually are. Imagine the human body as a candle, and your bounded sense of I, the little experiencer inside your head, as the flame. The candle is your biological vessel. It's running your genetics, your beliefs, your drives. And out of that complex interaction, the flame, the I, is produced. But just like a real candle, when the wax runs out, the flame ends. But wait, if the I dies, what is actually going on? Why are we even here doing all this? Well, consider the fact that your brain discards 99.9% of sensory data from your conscious awareness. Your eyes take in millions of bits of data. Your skin feels every single pressure point. Your mind generates an absolute industrial output of stray thoughts and dreams, and almost none of it reaches your conscious autobiography. Now, evolution is an incredibly stingy accountant. It does not fund massive metabolic costs just to throw data in the trash. So where is all that massive surplus of information going? It is feeding the collective.
Now, this isn't some dusty, ancient archive of inherited symbols like Carl Jung originally proposed. Not at all. It is a dynamic, living ocean. It's a live medium running right now, being continuously updated second by second by the mental surpluses of billions of humans, animals, and absolutely every conscious organism on this planet.
We are simply local nodes. Your body senses the world in the exact same way a single cell in your body takes in nutrients. It doesn't do it just for its own local use, right? It contributes it upward to the larger organism. You, right now, are gathering information and feeding it directly into a massive system that is orders of magnitude older and larger than our entire species.
Section 4. 4 words, 1 recognition.
Now that we understand the medium we're dealing with, this living, dynamic ocean, let's look at that ultimate destination reached by the great mystics, that 5th fate we mentioned earlier, the one that is actively chosen. Here is where the structural reality truly converges. Sufism points to Fana, the passing away of the bounded self. Buddhism points to Nirvana, the extinction of the conditions for bounded existence. The Vedantic tradition points to Moksha, the release and recognition of Atman as Brahman. And Christian mystics, they point to unio mystica, or mystical union. Think about that for a second. These incredibly diverse words, born from vastly different theological frameworks, are all pointing to the exact same structural translation.
Despite totally incompatible cultural cosmologies, whether it was an Islamic monotheistic framework, a Buddhist dependent origination framework, or a Christian Trinity framework, they all hit on the exact same profound truth. And that truth is that the separateness we feel in our minds is just a localized illusion. The apparent isolation of being a private self, sealed away inside a skull, is just a local, temporary configuration that your biological vessel was running.
Section 5. Easing the apparent separation.
So, the big question is, how do we actually experience this easing of apparent separation for ourselves? Well, this is exactly where contemplative practices come in. They aren't magic spells. They act as specific, repeatable technologies to step-by-step loosen our bounded sense of self. Whether it's Buddhist seated meditation, Sufi repetitive dhikr, or Christian contemplative prayer, these practices position the biological vessel. By intensely focusing attention, the practitioner slowly stops mistaking that bounded I for their true identity, and they eventually recognize their direct, unbroken continuity with the larger collective field. And when that recognition finally stabilizes, it brings this immense, grand relief. You finally realize that what felt sealed wasn't sealed. What felt private was actually never private. The apparent separation was just a local production all along. The field isn't someplace out there while you are stuck in here. You literally are the field, just locally configured for a brief, fleeting moment in time. Now, people who stabilize this recognition, this profound union, they don't just disappear in a puff of smoke. They don't all go withdraw to a cave somewhere. They continue living ordinary, embodied lives. They eat, they commute, they work, they age. But they do all of it with an incredible, distinct, peaceful presence. They're highly attentive and completely unself-conscious, simply because they are no longer trapped by the exhausting, constant illusion of having to defend a private, bounded self. Which leaves us with a pretty staggering question to reconsider absolutely everything you think you are. If your bounded I is just a local biological production, and your entire life is constantly feeding a massive, dynamic collective ocean, what is the field doing through you right now? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the structure of your reality.